thank you for. We thank you for breath in our body. We just thank you for just being there for us, Lord. So continue to bless us, continue to keep us, continue to be there for us. Now, Lord, each and every one of us are going through some things today. So, Lord, we just ask that you continue to bless us, continue to be with us, and whatever it is that we're going through, just whisper in our ear and just let us know that everything's going to be all right. Touch us individually, touch us as a group, and that we might get something out of this story today as long as we believe in you and trust in you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Let us all say amen. Um, we are appreciative for the grandparents of First Baptist Church, North Indianapolis, that bring us together to hear an encore presentation of the Morehouse class of 1991 doctors. And so we are moving now toward more education and even another vaccine, but let's continue to educate ourselves in this way. Welcome, and we are excited about this opportunity we have to hear from the Morehouse class of 1991 and our wonderful classmates that are doctors. Thank you for being here as we look forward to hearing about the COVID-19 vaccine. I am Ivan Douglas Hicks. It is my pleasure to serve as the president of the class of 1991. Please be informed. Please be educated, and thank you once again for being here on today. We want to move immediately to introduce Marima Mo Ivory, and as well, we want to invite everyone else to come and share with us on today. Dr. Alric Simmons, Dr. Maurice Willis, Dr. Corey Hebert, but our moderator for today is Mo Ivory. And so we are all members of the class of 1991. So it's good to see everybody again. Right? And as we come up on our 30th reunion, I don't want to date ourselves too much. But we thought that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us to get together. Mo Ivory is a wonderful, talented lawyer, and she is a political consultant. She's our classmate. And so I'm going to get out of the way because we have talented folk that are here. And so thank you all for being with us on today. And let's learn a little bit. And thank you all once again for being here.
Pleasure. Well, Ivan, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I'm really excited to be here to say hello to everybody and welcome to. If there are our classmates from the class of 1991, we want to give a very special welcome to you. And then we want to say thank you to everybody that's joining us for this really important conversation. And what else is on anybody's mind except getting the COVID vaccine? We've all watched the news. We see what is happening. People are waiting in lines, talking about the backlog. And so today we just want to clear up a bunch of myths, give some great information, and allow you to take this information back to your communities and maybe, give some clarity to what everybody is thinking. So let me introduce my classmates to you. I'm very excited to introduce first Dr. Maurice Willis. He is the professor of general oncology at the University of Texas Anderson Cancer Center in Galveston, Texas. Thanks, Maurice. Then we have Dr. Alric Simmons, who is the Vice President and Chief Medical Officer and also Chief Health Equity Officer at Advent Health in Orlando, Florida. Hi, Al. And then, of course, Dr. Corey Hebert, who is the Professor of Louisiana State University and Chief Medical Editor of the Black News Channel. And Corey is in New Orleans. And hi, Corey. So thank you all so much for joining us. It's nice to see everybody. And so let's just start out, Corey, I'm going to ask you the first question. Can you just really clarify for everybody, where did this virus come from?
Well, it came from the depths of hell, as far as I'm concerned. But right now, we really, We've had to wrap our minds around this scientifically, and we think it came from a wet meat market in Wuhan, China. This is a very difficult thing to ascertain because, as I've been to China many times, if you've been to these places, you see that they are butchering animals right there. And so it's pretty easy to think how something can come from an animal, then jump as an animal as a vector, and then jump into the human space, if you will, to show that, this thing probably happens all the time. Swine flu, we know it happens, bird flu, all these things. But this one was tough. And we're really not 100% sure. And even though the science is saying we're 100% sure, we call it the practice of medicine because we're honestly always looking. Nothing is 100%, but that's where we think it came from. And then once that goes from that animal into a human, that human goes home and then spreads it. And then because no one had ever been exposed to this, then no one had antibodies to it at all, which means it was able to be spread very, very quickly and went throughout our entire globe, and it's caused over 400,000 deaths to this day.
So that would have been somebody eating a piece of that meat from that market, or would it have been something that got into somebody's face? Like, would it have been ingested? That's how it would have happened?
Right. So this is a very interesting point that you would make, because theoretically, getting it into your nose, into your lungs, into your eyes are the ways that you really get this. It's not really something that you would really eat. So the way that it came to be is probably he or she butchered an animal, put their hands on it, rub their eyes, rub their nose, and that's probably how it got into his or her body, and then they transferred it to their family, and then that went from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. We're going to go to Dr. Maurice Willis next. Maurice, why are the death tolls so racially disproportionate?
So one of the things that we see is that a lot of Black people are overweight, and when you are having trouble breathing, that it really weighs on you, and that's why they have to flip them and put them prone. There is also something we just don't know about. Some people have different blood types that may be more susceptible, but the comorbidities are higher in Blacks. There's also a lot of people had talked about the blood clots that people can have. So people can have pulmonary emboli, people can have heart attacks and strokes on this. If you're already predisposed, like a lot of Blacks are, strokes, heart attacks, and all these things, the COVID virus actually makes it worse. And Corey can tell you in New Orleans, a lot of people died of things like that rather than just COVID itself. And they were not giving blood thinners early in the COVID vaccine, in the COVID, because they just know enough about it. And so people are starting to give more blood thinners, things as simple as just giving aspirin, making sure they give aspirin and other blood thinners to make sure that goes down. So you haven't seen the death toll as high as proportionally as it was, because they've learned how to take care of people better. Not that it's as virulent. They just learn how to take care of people better. And, they, said that, the obesity, and when you look at it in New Orleans, Blacks, whites, everybody down there is a little bit overweight. So there's still something we don't know. Corey, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, we initially had a 70% of the people that were dying in Louisiana were African American, and we can never, discount the social determinants of health, where we live, where we love, where we work, and where we play. So we can never think that we should be able to not get the diseases in a much worse way, because we don't have access to health care. We don't have access to good food. We don't have access to good jobs. We don't have access to good schools. And when you don't have access to any of those things, I don't care how great you are and how much you want to do, you are going to be at a very big disadvantage in everything. And that's including getting this disease, and it's also including getting the vaccine, which we'll probably talk about later. But once we acknowledge those things, and we have to say, Black people, we are constantly fighting, and trying to get over these humps, over these hurdles. Some of them put in advertently, some of them put in inadvertently, but most of them on purpose. And then every time we try to get to the end, we can't get through it because we're tired and weary of trying to jump over these hurdles. So we just give up. And that's when we get the diabetes and the hypertension and all these things. So that's our reality.
Yeah, let's bring Al into this. Dr. Al Simmons joins us also. And Al, talk to us about something that's on everybody's mind. How in the world did they come up with this vaccine so fast?
Yeah. So, that's a big point of contention for a number of people, particularly in the African American and Latinx communities, around their hesitancy to get vaccinated. And the reality of it is that, science and medicine in particular have made some incredible quantum leaps. Even if we just pan outside of virology and immunology and think about SpaceX. I mean, we're sending people into space with iPads now. We have autonomous driving cars. We have energy efficient electric cars. Science and medicine have grown at a rapid pace, and the ability to create a messenger RNA based vaccine is something that has actually been in the pipelines for quite some time. And so though what we see of it available seems to be very, very rapid, the reality of it is that this is not as new as the public is seeing it for the first time.
So why is that though? Why when we say, is it that it's been studied and it just wasn't in the news because it wasn't something to necessarily push to the front of the news cycle, but then because of the pandemic, it got pushed to the news cycle? So you're basically saying they had already really been looking at this strand of a vaccine in research.
Right. So messenger RNA, there's RNA and there's DNA, and those are part of the building blocks of all cells. And many of the vaccinations that we had used heretofore were not based on RNA. The DNA-based vaccinations took longer times to develop. So the messenger RNA, and this vaccine in particular, the Moderna and the Pfizer one, are working at a spike protein that allows for the coronavirus to bind to the lung cells. And so it basically is blocking the ability of the virus to bind to the sites that it causes the most damage. And so the specificity of the mRNA allows it to do that. And so I'm hopeful that as people really start understanding this more and more, that they will lean more towards getting vaccinated, and they will do so rapidly. As you've seen on the news lately, the number of coronavirus cases are decreasing as the number of vaccinations are increasing. So there's what we're starting to see, and I don't know if it's going to be proved out to be statistically significant, but we're already starting to see this incredible inflection point. And certainly as people of the African diaspora have died of this disease at a much higher rate, our hesitancy literally could be something that costs us our lives unless we make the right choice.
Yeah.
Mariah, can I jump in? And I want to add something to Al's point, because he said it so eloquently, because that is our reality. What we can't do as Black people is to think that, this vaccine was so rushed. What we need to think about is why it takes 8 years to bring a vaccine to market. That's the problem. America is a very capitalistic society, and don't get me wrong, it's a place I love to live here just like everybody else. I like it a lot better in the last 2 months, if you know what I'm saying. But what I will tell you is that, we have a lot of things that take way too long, because people have to take a bite of that apple all the way through. But from IRBs to people trying to make money to pharma companies trying to make money, other countries, it does not take this long to get a therapeutic, a medicine, or a vaccine. And if we ever go back to waiting and allowing them to take 8 years to get a vaccine, that's our bigger problem, as opposed to how fast this vaccine was rolled out.
So really, go ahead.
The other thing that I think the public needs to realize as well, or that people who are afraid of the speed at which the vaccine was delivered, was that these vaccines were actually tested. I mean, they were tested in over 33,000 humans. They went through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials. They went through the FDA and the CDC, and we had an emergency use authorization that basically looked at that data. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the Advent Health Vaccination Task Force, and so we looked very, very deeply at the science behind it, and the science is solid. The science is really, really solid. And literally, I was operating today, and in between cases, I was asked, which one should I get? And my response was the one that you can get the first. Because each day that you wait is another day that you run the risk of being exposed to this virus. And there's no need for any more people to die. We need to roll up our arms and get a shot. And quite honestly, I don't think that our job as citizens is finished when we get the shot. It's finished when we encourage somebody else to do so, because that's really the only way we're going to get back to normalcy in this country.
That's great, Al. Thank you for that. Maurice, I want to bring you back into the conversation. I think, everybody asks this question every day when they think about their life and how we're living now. And so when will we be able to get back to normal? Like, how fast after, or will we ever be able to get back to normal?
It depends on how many people get vaccinated and get a herd immunity. It's going to be next year this time or after, I believe, if we can get enough people vaccinated, maybe summer, maybe start traveling. But, until we get enough people vaccinated, we're not going to be getting back to normal. I think we'll be wearing masks at least through the summer. Even though I'm vaccinated, I wear a mask because I don't want to spread the COVID. We can be asymptomatic carriers and not get sick. So it's going to be a while. And the more we rush it, the more mistakes we're going to make.
Do you think that people will ever feel confident to be able to take their mask off? I mean, I think to myself that I'm not sure I'm ever going to sit, real close to people again at a concert, or I'm going to go and really be very close to people, because I think this pandemic has taught us a lot about just the idea that something can happen and come up. I mean, are we going to change our habits indefinitely, maybe?
I doubt that. I mean, there have been pandemics throughout history. There's been the 1918 flu epidemic. People have short memories. They're going to, as soon as they can, they're going to. When we look at the spikes and dips in the coronavirus, when there's a dip in people reporting corona, you see people taking their mask off already. It's like when you get off a plane, right? Everybody starts unbuckling as soon as the plane hits the ground. I think people are going to forget very quickly. Now, you're going to have some people who are germaphobes who love this environment, and they'll probably have a good excuse to continue. But I'm sure next year this time, people are going to be trying to ditch as much as they can.
Corey, why do you think Black folks are so afraid to take the vaccine?
Well, there's a couple of things about that really drive me a little bit nuts about it. But I want to just kind of throw something out there about this concept of the vaccine. I'm going to have it. The virus is just like a burglar trying to break into your house. Before you go to sleep, you check all of the doors, all of the windows, and that's your job, to check everything and make sure that it's safe. The burglar only has to find the one window that you left open. So that virus is constantly trying to do that. That's its job daily. So what we must do is we have to stop the replication, because if the burglar can get into the house, then it can replicate. The more it can replicate, the more it can mutate. So we have to get the shots in arms so that we can't allow this virus to infect us and then mutate, because we know those are the issues with the variants. I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but we've got to stop the variants. And the only way we can do that is to stop the infection in our homes, meaning in our bodies. But Black people, historically, we talk about the Tuskegee experiment. That's nothing compared to the egregious things that Black people have been exposed to from medical establishment and medical misconduct. I mean, there's medical schools that are built on top of graves where African Americans they just would rob the graves and use those patients, those dead bodies as cadavers. I mean, we have all the way up to Henrietta Lack, who hasn't made any money on the whole concept of the HeLa cell that has made it so that we can actually be sitting here talking about vaccines and everything else. So this concept is something that we must always realize, that Black people, we have a reason. It's called earned distrust. The problem is, though, that most people don't know the story of Onesimus. Onesimus was a slave during the smallpox epidemic, and he had a slave master named Cotton Mather. He said, Cotton, hey, man, smallpox is killing folks. In my country, where I come from, we used to take a stick and rub it on a smallpox lesion, and then rub it on somebody else that doesn't have smallpox, and they wouldn't get it. And so Cotton Mather wouldn't believe him, obviously, because he's like, "You're a slave, get out of my face." And then, but after people started dying, Cotton Mather, who's a white man, said, "You know what? I'll believe it." They did it. They saved their own lives. And then about 100 years later, a doctor said, "I'm going to try this again. I'm going to try, but I'm not going to use smallpox. I'm going to use something called cowpox because it won't kill people if I'm wrong." And then he used the cowpox. It worked again. And then that's where the Latin word for cow is vaca. That's where vaccination comes from. And a black man invented vaccination, the Onesimus slave. So when you go to Boston, he saved thousands of lives, and there's a statue up to him as the father of vaccination. So we invented everything. So we can't be scared of this stuff. We just got to take hold of it and recognize what we got to do.
Wow. Thank you for educating us, Corey, on that piece of Black history that we needed to know and so important in this month. So I thank you for giving us that information. Al, what are the potential long-term effects of COVID-19?
So COVID-19 is showing us a lot, and Maurice kind of alluded to some of that earlier on. So COVID-19 is really about a pulmonary inflammatory response. If you're an asthmatic, this is an asthma attack on steroids, no pun intended. It causes severe scarring, what we call fibrosis, an abnormal condition of fibrin deposit in the parts of the lung that do oxygen exchange. So when we take a breath in and out, we're taking in oxygen, it is passing into our red blood cells, our heart is pumping that throughout our body. COVID causes this inflammatory process in what's called the alveolar sacs, and causes scarring, severe scarring. It also can cause these clots that Dr. Wills mentioned as well, and people can have pulmonary emboli where the blood can't get through. Even if you should survive that or have the ability to recover from the COVID-based pneumonia, still can have what are known as pulmonary mismatch effects, where blood does not flow equally through the lungs as it did prior to the infection. Or you have to be on anticoagulation for long periods of time. A number of people, particularly African-American and Latinx folks who have pre-existing conditions, then have a worsening of all of those conditions. Mm-hmm. So if you've had congestive heart failure before you got coronavirus, now you've got that plus. If you've had diabetes and your blood sugar was out of control, this is still an infection, and your blood sugar tends to rise very precipitously during infection, and affects your body's ability to fight the infection off, actually. Then you worsen that situation as well. Sickle cell disease, same way. So all of the existing conditions that were there prior to this novel coronavirus coming into our knowledge base makes all those diseases worse, as well as having all of these other untoward effects: blood clots, coronary vessel clotting, heart attacks, pneumonia, scarring of the lungs, potentially permanently. And so I think over time, we'll really get to understand what the effects are. And some even think, the sign now of loss of taste and loss of smell may represent some inflammatory changes to what are known as the cranial nerves that give us innervation to our nose and our tongue. And so there may even be over time that we find that there's some neurologic deficit that's there. Fortunately, most of those patients seem as though they recover those kinds of deficits though.
So once, just on that thought pattern, once somebody has had COVID and goes home and is recovering, is this something that they have to, then will they be going to the doctor, every 6 months or is it just going to be when they're not feeling well, like like normal? Or is
That's a great question. And I think part of that gets into access to healthcare, right? As Corey mentioned earlier about the social determinants of health. The reality of it is you need to go to the doctor when you're not feeling bad. There are times you just need to go for wellness and prevention. And that's where we really have the opportunity to flip the script. We can use COVID as this alarm that says, hey, listen, I really need to go and I need to know my numbers. I need to know what my hemoglobin A1C is. Am I at risk for being diabetic? I need to know what my good and bad HDL and LDL cholesterol is. I need to know, am I anemic or am I not? If I've had respiratory problems, I need to know and learn what my oxygen saturation is. It's simple. You can buy a pulse oximeter in Walgreens, right? You can buy a blood pressure cuff in Walgreens. So we've got to get to the point as a people where we stop going to the doctor when we are super sick, right? I see ladies all the time who've got fungating breast cancers, literally, where the cancer is growing through the skin. and we've got to treat them. And then I see wealthier white patients who come in for their first screening mammogram at age 40, see an abnormality, have a biopsy, we save their breast. And I think a lot of that is because of that mindset of people of color and the distrust that we all know is existent and justifiable. But we've got to get beyond that as a people if we want to be healthy from the cradle to the grave. We have higher incidence of infant mortality. The shortest life expectancy is that of African-American men at 71. So our babies die at 3x any other race. And we as Black men die prematurely as well. And so the only way that we do that is to allow coronavirus and this COVID-19 pandemic to really ring the alarm, to wake us up to what we need to do to start taking care of ourselves.
Wow, that's something we hear all the time, you know, to take care of ourselves and to include wellness as a part of our medical journey. But it's really hard, and everybody will say, you know, well, if I'm not sick, why do I need to be running around going to the doctor and stuff? But it is very important to know these things, especially as we all are, you know, 50, at least the class of 91 and above. And we need to just take care of ourselves in that way. So thanks, Al, for talking about that. Maurice, we were talking earlier, expressed to you that I had gotten my first vaccine, Moderna, this past weekend, and that my arm really was hurting. And you told me about your experience getting both of your shots, and that the second one is even the real doozy. So just talk a little bit to everybody who either has had the shot already or is anticipating getting the vaccine, what they can expect when they get the shot, and then tell them about what not to do that you told me.
Okay. So everybody should get a sore arm, and it's not immediate. The vaccine is not a thick vaccine. So when you get the shot, you barely feel it. But a couple hours later, definitely the night of, you feel like a gorilla hit your arm. And so that's normal. The second shot, my soreness was even worse, and I even got muscle aches. Some people get fevers. What this virus is doing, it's not a live virus that they give you the spike protein. What's it doing? It's waking your immune system up to be able to attack that spike protein. So you've been exposed to the spike protein with the first vaccine, and then you get a little bit more spike protein in the second injection, and your body has an inflammatory response to it. That's why people have headaches. That's why people have soreness. It's a general inflammatory response. Inflammatory response is bad when it overwhelms your body and you get septic and you get very sick and you end up in the ICU. But a little inflammatory or enough inflammatory to build your immune system up is good. Now, things that you do that may help your soreness that can affect that immunity and that inflammatory response, if you take anti-inflammatories before, is not suggested, because you may not be able to get the inflammatory response you need from that spike protein. So you really don't need to take Tylenol or Motrin before, even though it makes common sense. That's not what the CDC recommends. It doesn't recommend taking any anti-inflammatory before you take the injection, because you may your immune response needs to mount and give you a slight inflammatory response. So Corey was talking about smallpox, which is very, everybody our age, we can pull our shirt down and up on our shoulders and we see a scar. That's because we got the smallpox vaccine and it created an inflammatory response, and smallpox is gone here. We got that inflammatory response and you got a scar. Everybody that's been vaccinated against smallpox has a scar. My children don't have a scar because smallpox was gone when they were born.
Wow, that's very interesting. Thank you for that, because I wanted people to not to deal with sort of the fear of getting the vaccine and the things that they need to know about getting the vaccine. And I know that my arm was very, very sore. So I got it in the arm that I don't write with, so that I wouldn't, have that soreness in my right arm. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it just seemed like it would make more sense to do it that way. So I just offer that out to anybody that wants that. I wanted to ask Corey, do you prefer one vaccine over another?
No, I'm kind of a weird guy here because I'm the principal investigator on a couple of clinical trials for vaccines and monoclonal antibodies. So about 6 months or 7 months ago, one of the manufacturers, I'm the guy that does the trial. So I didn't want to, be the person in charge of the trial and not get the vaccine. So I got a vaccine when I felt like I was a real monkey because nobody had it and everybody said, I'm not getting the vaccine. So I got it and I got the Sanofi vaccine. Anyway, so it's not out yet. And I had to find out whether I got the placebo or the real one. And I actually did get the real one and I had no response at all, meaning like I didn't have any side effect profile. But just remember, there's no vaccine that's going to be better. They're all going to be a little bit different. The AstraZeneca vaccine just got pulled from South Africa right now because it's not really working well in the South African variant. That's the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's not ready here yet. And I don't know if it's going to be because they had some issues with their data points, which kind of pushed it back. And now since the South African variant is all over, then if it's not working even to prevent mild illness in South Africa and they have 1 million doses, I don't know that it'll be here anytime soon. But the point is, all of them are good. And what I will say, see, when you're a guy that looks like Al, meaning like, got big muscles, Al goes to the gym all the time, right? So what he did to get to those big muscles he's got, he had to go to the gym. And when he had to work out those muscles, when he came home, he was sore as hell. But he had to get sore to build up his muscles, right? So I want people just to think about when you want to build up your immunity, you're going to get a little bit sore. And that soreness is the inside of your body, the fever, the chills. That's your body feeling that soreness because at the end, you're going to look like Al. And
Let me just say this. So
Corey's a little, analogies, Corey.
Yeah, well, Corey's a little delusional about all the biases, but I appreciate it. Thank you. But I think that it's also important that we say that all of this soreness is very short-lived. 24 hours, absolutely, and you are fine. So, it's important that people know. And by the way, this is all documented. Long before healthcare providers even got their first dose of vaccine, we knew that the second dose would be the one that caused, as Maurice said, the most degree of inflammation. We knew that 13% of people would get headaches and 40-some-odd% would get joint pains. And that's all in the scientific research that was submitted to both the Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control. And by the way, it's publicly available for anybody who is so inclined to read it, so that they have more information to make an informed decision. Having received both of my doses, I will tell you, the first dose is an intramuscular shot. It didn't even feel like a bee sting. The second, I was sore, but within 24, 48 hours, I was back to normal again. And so I think that's, we want people to understand what they're going to be exposed to, but I think it's also very, very important for us to let them know that I would rather take 24 hours of being sore than taking 6 months in the intensive care unit on a respirator because I have COVID pneumonia. And I tell you, there's a very, very interesting time study when you look at people. Remember now, 80% of people who get coronavirus will do just fine and not even need hospitalization. But if you are so unfortunate, as many Black people are, to be part of that 20% that gets hospitalized, and then that 10% that goes to the intensive care unit, and then that 4 or 5% that goes to that gets intubated, then you're really playing Russian roulette with your life. And I think that 48 hours is a little bit of achy soreness as far. The risk to benefit ratio for that decision is very, very clear.
I want to throw something out here to that Al too. We're talking about the vaccines. We're talking about Moderna and Pfizer, but the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is going to be out soon. And please don't poo-poo that vaccine because it's got 66% effectiveness. That vaccine was tested on people that had already been exposed. People were had variants in that clinical trial, which means that it was a little bit more robust in what it had to do. Also, it was over 90% in protection for you to not die, as much as just like Pfizer or Moderna. So, you are going to get the same type of protection from dying as you would with Pfizer and Moderna. It may be easier for you to get. It's a one-shot vaccine. It's a vector vaccine using an adenovirus as a vector, and it goes in and operates totally different than the mRNA vaccine. But the studies show that it works. It works well. It travels well. So I just don't want people to say, oh, I'm going to wait to get my mRNA vaccine because it's 94, 95%. And you can't compare those. That's apples to oranges because they were never done head-to-head in studies. So please, if you whatever vaccine you can get, you need to be able to get it. And with that,
can you explain I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Can you just explain why there are like all these different vaccines that only have like one has 98%, one has 90. If one company has it and it's 98, then why can't all the companies make it and it be 98% effective? Why is one is another and another is not? Please explain that.
I'm gonna tell you why. Because we live in America and it's capitalism. And what happened is that everybody said, we don't know what we're gonna do to make this vaccine. This was a year ago. We don't know. But I'm going to choose this one because I think this one is going to get me over the finish line first. That was Johnson & Johnson. They chose the adenovirus. And then you have another one that chose the monkey adjuvant to be able to use that one to use that protein to get into the cell. Some people said they're going to use the mRNA vaccine. So it was off to the races. Money being spent, the Operation Warp Speed spending billions of dollars manufacturing all these vaccines. We don't even know if any of them were going to work. Not only did they test them, they manufactured them so that as soon as they hit the ground running, they were actually going to be given. That's the same thing with Johnson & Johnson. Right now, there's 100 million doses of vaccine of Johnson & Johnson. We don't even know if it's going to get, well, we do know now that it's going to get emergency use authorization, probably. But the point is, every company wanted to do their thing, thinking that their thing was going to be better and faster. And then everything plays out in the clinical trial. And then Pfizer and Moderna won.
Okay. I just wanted you to clear that up for everybody.
And I'm gonna have to sign off.
Okay.
Sign off, but I'm gonna get back on.
All right. We'll see you in a minute.
Okay.
Corey has to go take care of some TV work that he does. We're proud of him for that, being our superstar. So, Maurice, talking about the Johnson & Johnson and all, the speed of everybody was off to the races to try to get there. How can you just know that this is really it happened so fast? I mean, what can you say to folks that even now are listening to this and hearing what Corey just said about like off to the races and they were doing this and they were doing that? How did you know the FDA didn't just emergency authorize something that might not work?
So I want to give you a little bit of what I do. Just like Corey, I'm PI on principal investigator on a lot of cancer trials. So the difference in cancer and maybe a virus or infection is that most people would accept a cancer treatment that has gone through a clinical trial and shown efficacy as, they adopt it very quickly. But something that you have to give a great deal of people are saying they don't trust it. I looked at the data. I do clinical trials. They did the clinical trial right. We approved some cancer drugs on a couple hundred patients. There were thousands of patients that they gave this vaccine to. This was well done. The data is, 95, 98. You can't look at, well, I'm going to get the one that's 98% or 95%. You don't know, not all of them had the same equal population. Some people were, some were all American, some were European and American. You have some things that are not equal in all trials, okay? And you have two mRNA vaccines that were not necessarily quite equal, but they're effective. So when there is a virus that's going to kill you and you don't know where you got it from, you can't go like it's the flu. Oh, they look sick. That's where I get it from. This is really scary for healthcare providers. I tell you, I'm a fellowship program director. I had physicians that did not want to see patients last year. I had to make them do their job. They were afraid. And so while healthcare providers taking it, because we fear for our lives. There are very few healthcare providers that are not taking it. I can't imagine myself laying in a bed about to get intubated and telling my family, I know I could have got a shot to prevent this, but I'm scared. I just can't, I just couldn't do that. So I'm going to take the chance. I may grow an extra toe, may go more bald, whatever, 20 years down the line, but I'm living this year. I can make a little bit more money to give my kids and wife.
Yeah. Maurice, I think that's a great point that you bring up. And the reality of it is that if you get sick and you come to the hospital, you are likely to be taken care of by a healthcare provider who's vaccinated.
Yes.
And we are doing that to care for ourselves and so that we can care for our patients. And I think that in and of itself should be a real big boost to anybody who is concerned about the validity or what healthcare providers think about the efficacy and the safety of being vaccinated. I was proud to be able to get vaccinated as quickly as possible. It gave me great confidence walking through the intensive care unit and walking into the operating room, knowing that I had that extra protection. And I hope that everybody who hears this discussion or hears any other discussion gets to that point of comfort within themselves as well. And we've got to realize that, people's minds will be changed. We've done some really good targeted studies at Advent Health looking at the hesitancy. And it's interesting. I mean, there's some interesting demographics around who's ready to accept it. And the folk, we looked at a test base of 90,000 people across the country. And those who are 65 to 81 are those who are most inclined to take the vaccine. More men than women, and that makes some sense as well because there weren't very many lactating moms or women who were of childbearing age who were included in the trials. And so there was some equivocation as to whether or not it was safe. So the World Health Organization, for example, says that they don't recommend it being given to women who are childbearing age or lactating. But in our country, the American College of OBGYN and the specialty that takes care of newborns both said that they feel that though women should be vaccinated because the risk of any woman who's had a baby knows that the baby's feet push on your diaphragm and shortens your breath and kicks you. So put that burden of respiratory compromise on top of a rampant infection, and women who are pregnant have very, very untoward outcomes from COVID-19. So I think that everybody has just got to really get up to speed and understand and put some of these fears away and just realize that it's your action and your choice that's going to cure your fear. And we want that. We want to be able to sit around and have these kinds of dialogues. I think all of us on this screen have all been vaccinated. What we don't want to do is to die the silent death of COVID, where you can't have family members come and hold your hand, say goodbye and kiss you. We need to bring an end to that.
Thank you for that. That is such a heartbreaking reality for so many in this fight. And so let's talk about how to get the vaccine and what you know about the shortages and maybe some shortcuts, if that's the right, I don't know if that's the right word, but like, wait, should you hover around your Publix pharmacy around 5 o'clock every day in case somebody didn't show up? Like what should you do? And when will people who are not in the 1A first category or the second category, how can they get it sooner?
Maurice, I'll take a swing at that. Honestly, I think that is, and not to make this a political conversation, but I think that was part of the problem when you had an operation like Warp Speed roll out and then leave it to individual states as to how they were going to get the shots into people's arms. And so, I'm in Florida, and if you're 65 or older, you can get it now. I know people who are in other states, and you got to be 75. I know in Maryland and some states up north, if you're a teacher, you can get vaccinated. So I think the real thing is to understand, one, what is the Biden-Harris administration going to do in terms of federalizing this effort? Yesterday being the Super Bowl, we heard some talk about using NFL stadiums as mass vaccination sites. Here we have a site at the Orlando International Airport that we use a max vaccination site that can vaccinate up to 2,000 to 3,000 people a day. And so I think you really have got to be tuned in to your local Department of Health and understand what is available in your local community, because unfortunately today it differs based upon what state you're in.
And not only just what state you're in, but how you're getting the information. I think that's really important because everybody's not getting, you know, if you have a friend who's a doctor and is, you know, getting a bunch of information and can text you and say, well, you know, such and such a hospital has it, or this Department of Health has it, then you're in a superior position than people who are just getting the information from the news or don't have access to the internet and are not, you know, going and signing up immediately when a thing comes open. But talk about, Maurice, talk about caregivers. The category is older people right now, but what if you're a caregiver?
So if you're a healthcare professional or just a caregiver? Just
a caregiver. You take care of your mom.
So right now, a lot of states are not giving it to necessarily caregivers, but one initiative that MD Anderson is getting now for our employees, if your spouse or something has not been vaccinated, since we're healthcare workers and we're exposing our spouse, they're vaccinating our spouses. The issue is it's left up to each state, and everything is wild, wild west. And there is no secrecy of what's coming from the top of the U.S. government. I think that's going to take months to happen. And I can tell you some stories also locally that we've had in paper. There's supposedly 11,000 Asians in Galveston County. There have been 12,000 Asians vaccinated in Galveston County. Okay, so they read, they may be healthcare providers. So they jumped on this very quickly. They also said that they come on the news and said that we're not giving enough vaccination in the low income, Hispanic, or Black community. So they held a vaccination clinic at a Black church. But guess what? Not enough Black people signed up. The first people to get there were Caucasians because they learned where it was and signed up. And so we, UTMB, MD Anderson, we are a hub to give vaccinations. And when I come to the hallway and see those people getting vaccinated, most of them are not Black. And when I talk to Black people, they're like, well, we're going to let y'all take that experiment and all that and stuff. Is, you know, and the thing about it, if you've ever seen somebody get cured of cancer, listen to this, cured of cancer and died from COVID in a couple of weeks. I cured him of cancer and he died from COVID in a couple of weeks. That is the most heartbreaking. You work so hard to take care of somebody, and that's where we are, and they caught it in the hospital after they received chemotherapy. And it's mind-boggling for people not to take some prevention. But you got to realize a lot of Blacks and Hispanics don't want to go to the doctor to do anything, to get screened for high blood pressure, to get screened for diabetes. They're afraid of doctors, and then they just harken back to all the bad things that have happened to Black people with these experiments. And it is, you know, it is not the same, you know, when you see all the people uptaking this are white and Asians, and you don't want to take it in, and you see people. Well, I could see if they were getting done in secret, but you see people who are rushing to take these vaccines and just using the excuse, and we're a higher risk of getting it. It's mind-boggling to me as a Black man that you have these people that are so susceptible to dying. So when we're 50, Black and overweight, I don't have any comorbidities. They do a point scale. I have a much higher chance of dying than a Caucasian person of the same age. I have no comorbidities. So when you can see, you know, Aldrich and I, we see people dying in the hospital. I have nurses that I know that are basically on antidepressants because they work in the ICU and they see people dying, and they just can't understand the stupidity of other people. It just, when they go out and they don't see people wearing masks and they're crying and trying to prevent from catching COVID, seeing people die and their loved ones not there to hold their hand, those ICU nurses, I mean, they're going to need counseling. They're going to need antidepressants after this is over. I mean, they're still going through it. I mean, there's going to be a lot of PTSD from healthcare professionals when they walk out of the hospital and get into Walmart and you feel less safe at Walmart because of people are not wearing masks. I'm from a small town in Georgia. I go home and go to a hardware store and they're not wearing masks like there's nothing out there. And you might get the Russian roulette and not get it, but it's, just wearing a mask. And I love my rights in the United States, but you also have the right to die. And I'm not trying to do stupid things to die.
And once you get the vaccine and there's still going to be all these people who don't get the vaccine or who don't wear masks, you're protecting yourself by getting the vaccine from these type of people. That's right?
Right. And I'm still wearing my mask and washing my hands using good hygiene because I don't want to spread it to my patients. I don't want to spread it to my family members. So even though I'm vaccinated, I'm still not going to walk out there like it's the Wild Wild West and say, hey, I'm good. Forget the rest of y'all.
One thing that I think, Maurice, you alluded to that I think is really, really important. We talk about curing people of cancer and then having them die of COVID, is that COVID has not stopped other diseases from ongoing, right? And if you think about it, I mean, we're now in February. Last year, March, we were telling people don't go to the emergency department if you were sick, right? Stay home. Do these things. Hospitals were closing. We stopped doing elective surgeries across many places. And people stopped getting screening tests. They stopped getting mammograms. They stopped getting their prostate checked. They stopped getting colonoscopies. They, and those diseases continue to ravage us, right? And so I think that's the other piece that we have to be mindful of is that, again, use this alarm of COVID. Use it to dedicate yourself to doing the right things. Don't delay your health care because of coronavirus. People in the hospital largely are vaccinated, and we vaccinated ourselves because we want to be able to take care of ourselves and to take care of our patients. And so we want to encourage the patients to do the same thing and get themselves taken care of.
This is all great information, and I'm so glad Corey is back with us. And we're going to start to wrap up. And so I just want to go around to, first, I want to say thank you guys so much for doing this. I'm so proud of all three of you. And all this information is so important. And it feels like we're just a family. We are just a family coming together to try to keep each other healthy. And so thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. But I'd like to just go around and have you just say one, last thing that you'd like on the topic. If you want to give out any websites or any places people can go that you've found to be great places for information, and then also how they can follow you as you continue to put out on social media the things that people need to be looking at. So if we could just go one by one, and Corey, you can start.
Okay. Yes, I just want to thank everybody for allowing us to come on and to talk about these things, because there is a lot of myth out there, but there's also a lot of fear. One of my really good friends that I graduated from medical school with, Winston McIver, and he doesn't mind talking about it. He is a physician and got COVID about 3 weeks ago. And he remembers, he told me this the other day out of his own mouth. He remembers he could hear them talking about, man, Dr. McIver, he did so much for the community. He was so good, all the things, we're going to miss him. Because he was that sick. He had a ground glass appearance in both of his lungs. He was on oxygen. They gave him the Regeneron. They gave him the remdesivir. They gave him antibiotics, steroids, everything, 5 days. And they told him he might make it, he might not. That is real. So we cannot, first of all, I don't think that there's anybody on here that's from that concept of where this is a hoax. I don't think that anybody's out there. If you are, then you need to get off, okay? Because we don't even need that kind of negative energy on here. However, what I do need people to understand is if you get the vaccine, theoretically, you might not feel so good for a day or so, but you will be protected. And even though, like I mentioned when we first started, the practice of medicine, nothing is foolproof. But what is foolproof is that virus can't jump through that mask. That virus can't jump through that face shield. If you wash that virus off your hands and you don't put your finger in your nose or in your eyes, you can't get it. Okay. So all that stuff, all of the science, that's all 99.9%. But it's you. It's you. And if you do what you're supposed to do and stop having all these Super Bowl parties and having these small gatherings, which is where people are getting this most, not the Tampa Bay in the streets. That's not where people are getting this most. It's parties of 10 or less at your house when your uncle is drinking Crown and don't have his mask on and was out at the club 2 nights ago. That's where you're getting it. And so if we don't stop doing that, then we are the ones that are suffering. And that's the irony. We are the ones that are getting it. We're the ones that don't want to take the vaccine. We're the ones that can't get the vaccine, and we're the ones that are dying. So we have to step up and be the people that we know that we can be, that cross that middle passage. That's what we need to be.
Thank you, Corey. Maurice, I'd love to hear from you next. Unmute yourself. Okay, there you go.
There are a lot of naysayers out there who are saying, well, we got this new South African strand that the vaccines are not working for. See, I told you y'all didn't know what you were doing. But that's like saying you buy a car today with the best airbag protections, and then they go create a different car that was not there when they built your car that may hurt your car worse. But your car is still drivable and effective against most other cars of you dying from a crash. But that one car may get you. So we have to take what we have, and as things go along, we might have to take boosters. We don't even know if we're going to have to take another COVID vaccination next year. We might be getting titers to see if we have our titers high enough. This thing is evolving. So a lot of information that goes out is not based on sometimes the science. It's based off the availability of what we have. Last year, this time they were saying, oh, don't wear masks, don't do that. That was based on they didn't have enough masks to give everybody. That's why they said that, not because it was the right thing to do. As we evolve, we went from not wearing masks to wearing masks to getting vaccinations. And at some point, we might need to get boosters. At some point, everybody might need to get titers. This is evolving. Listen to the scientists. It's not who you voting for or who says what you need to do. Listen to the science. And if it was bad science, Corey and I professors, we tear up articles all the time that things are approved that we say are trash. Right, Corey?
Absolutely.
I mean, we go to the journal clubs and say how trash this article is. The information that we have read is not trash. And we're telling you that not as doctors, but brothers at Morehouse that promised to make a difference when we went through those 4 years in Morehouse to help our people. We put that promise. There's no money in the world that is going to get beyond that promise that we made going through Morehouse in Sale Hall, holding hands, in making it was so hot, the varnish came off the seats when we were singing in Sale Hall in 1987 at 110 degree heat.
That's right. Amen, brother. Amen, brother.
Amen. Well, thank you, Maurice, for that. And so, Al, wrap us all up on just the directive for everybody to go get their COVID shot.
You know, Maurice has got me nostalgic now. I'm thinking about that bell ringing and running to the bell in the middle of the night, you know. But no, I think I remain incredibly optimistic about Black people and our health, and America and its health. And I think that most people of color know someone who has died from COVID-19. And if you think that their death was in vain, then do something about it. If you've known of a loved one who is in the ICU or in the hospital, or you have a loved one who is a care provider, and you're worried about them, then do something about it. Make the responsible choice and get vaccinated. The science is solid. I have read it. Corey has read it. Maurice has read it. I'm not getting paid to be here, nor are either of them. We are here because we took an oath, because we are Morehouse men, because we believe in the science, and because we're sick and tired of seeing people who look like us die. And so what I would say is do the responsible thing and get vaccinated. Wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance. This will be behind us. You just want to be amongst the living who see it behind you.
Yes. I want to say thank you to Dr. Maurice Willis. Go, Corey.
Wash up, mask up, separate, vaccinate. Wash up, mask up, separate, vaccinate. That's my hashtag, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it.
I love it. And that is Dr. Corey Hebert and Dr. Alric Simmons and Dr. Maurice Willis. Just want to say thank you so much, my brothers, from the class of 1991, the most special class to ever graduate. And for coming and just giving us this information and taking your time out to give our class, to give everybody that's on this call this information. It's just been a lovely evening spending with you. And so I hope everybody is safe. Thank you for joining us. We wish you nothing but good health and love. And thanks again for joining us. And thank you to all three of you. Bye, everybody. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Give ourselves in